Congratulations. It's a great success story. Another question from our colleagues. How can the IDB and other multinational organizations bring about greater levels of accountability during reconstruction? Who should lead this? Multilateral, donor organizations, donor governments? How do we best accomplish that goal?
Well, there's a lot of thinking that went in the last 2 months to look at how best to do this in Haiti. On the one hand, you have over 7,000 NGOs operating in Haiti with very little accountability. Maybe 50 of them are doing, big work there. But there's all kinds of people working in Haiti and have been for many years. On the other hand, when you look at the experience in some of the Central American countries with the hurricanes, and also, and more importantly, the experience in Indonesia, in Aceh, was that you created a single development authority, and that development authority would have both representation from the donors and from the local government and the country, in this case Haiti. What was created was a 3-tiered type of organization that in the bottom has a number of development experts in the different fields that need to be part of the whole reconstruction effort. And there, you can pull some of the best talent both from Haiti and from outside of Haiti. And they will be employed by this development authority that in 18 months will be a fully Haitian institution. In the middle, you have kind of like a board that has the representation of the Prime Minister of Haiti and President Clinton as the UN Special Envoy. And under them, there is kind of like a board of directors composed of the major donors and institutions like the World Bank and the IDB and others, and then chaired by the President of Haiti. At the end, we will do a huge effort to repair Haiti, but if the Haitians don't want it more than us, it's going to be very difficult to do. Right. And that's precisely the main challenge. We've been working very hard in helping put this process together. And one of the areas that we want to make a huge difference is in education. We've been working with Paul Lavas, who I'm sure you know, who worked in New Orleans and in Chicago, but more importantly, learned of the lessons of Katrina, of how to really upscale education in New Orleans. In Haiti, you have about 72% of the education is private. And this is not unlike many countries in Africa. However, the quality of that education is, all over the map. So the question here is, how do you provide and create a system whereby you do direct transfers to teachers, you have a common type of institutional makeup, and begin to test the quality of those teachers, and based on that you begin to have the payments to the whole education system, and then you can either have it, be it charter schools like you have in the US, or public schools for that matter, but have a universal quality for the country. If we're able to do this, this is another huge component of getting the whole process of Haiti right. And this is something that you cannot do for 2 or 3 years, as you know well. This is truly something that you need to do for the next 10 or 15 years.
I want to come back to something that you mentioned before, that the leadership in the region has, in the context of the financial crisis of the last 18 months, have seen this movie before. But the facts are that the region has been less impacted in this particular crisis than other parts of the world have, including our own country. As our Congress is debating financial reform, what lessons can we learn from the ways in which Latin America and the Caribbean have responded during this most recent banking and currency crisis?
The first thing is that in the case of Latin America, the contagion did not come through the financial channel, like it happened, for instance, in Eastern Europe. It happened through the trade channel. As trade collapsed, especially in the last part of 2008 and into 2009. So that was the real impact, and it affected countries differently. In the case of, I think the real lessons in Latin America came from changes in regulation, the kind of progressive regulation where you basically in the good years required, and this by the way is not equal in every country, but in general terms, solvency ratios had to be better. Loan-to-loan ratios had to be increased. And the regulators were all over the institutions. And this is why you never found, you know, the kind of toxic assets that you saw throughout Europe and Eastern Europe in any Latin American banks. What you saw, however, is something very interesting. You see, perhaps today, the IMF put out this weekend a report where it said that the losses of financial institutions was about $2.3 trillion in losses. In Latin America, in a period of 5 years, financial institutions almost doubled in size. So there's, you know, a very good story.
That's where all the money went.
Yeah, well, no. that tells you a lot about where the savings and the growth that was happening. So what did happen was, in the real sector of the economy, there were some basically options that some companies bought that as you had the shock and that we had, and you had some currencies devalue very quickly. They lost because they were tied in some instruments, and that affected some of the large companies, mainly in Mexico and in Brazil. But all in all, you didn't see that, and that was the quality of the regulation. And I think the lessons of the past and the quality of technocracy that you have today.
Okay.
Now, what does mean in terms of financial regulation? That you have some very good banks in Latin America that probably are going, this push in the US that is going to go throughout the world is going to punish some institutions that were doing the right things.
Let's talk a little bit about the geopolitics of the whole region right now. There's lots of differences between the governments and the interests and the perspectives of leadership throughout the region. How does the circumstances, for example, in Venezuela or Ecuador, Bolivia, how do the differences in political regimes, political intentions impact the ability of the bank to develop a coherent development strategy for the region?
Well, this is a true challenge, as you can understand, because we have all kinds of political outcomes in Latin America today. What we do is basically what we call a country strategy, and we'll sit down with the incoming administration and plan for the next 4 or 5 years the kinds of things that we will be doing in that country and the kinds of projects that we will be supporting. And that is a strategy that is very widely discussed, not only with the government, but elements in civil society in that country. And then is discussed in our board, and once that's approved, then we'll begin a process of basically doing projects along that strategy. So we stay within those projects, and of course, the larger political discussion, we try to stay away as much as we can. But, you know, sometimes it hits you in the face.